2. We are just about getting started with this important event today, or this important conversation we're going to have. My name is Namhla Mniki, and I work with the team that is working on the SDG initiative in South Africa, and I'm the convener of the symposium in particular. It's my singular pleasure to welcome you today in such a critical conversation that we are going to have. Over the last year in 2020 and the last few months of this year, we have been working quite tirelessly on a program of ensuring that South Africa actually is on its road, on its way, not only to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, but also in terms of establishing the National Development Stakeholders Forum. So what we are doing here today really is almost like a celebratory moment, if you like, because we are going to be launching the report that came out of the symposium where we were discussing these critical things. But more than that, we are going to be paving the way of all of the things that we have discussed in the past. How do we ensure that we actually have an inclusive, transformative recovery in South Africa? Now, despite the fact that this is a major milestone that we are at today, because it demonstrates that we have been engaged with the conversation of the Sustainable Development Goals, we are also at a moment in South Africa where both the reality and the spirit is in a somber atmosphere, because all of us know that everywhere in the country we've been worried about the violence that started in KZN, but also spread through Gauteng in the last few days, as it were, beginning last Saturday. I think when we were meeting, in last year, one of the things that we thought we were trying to address and we were reeling from was COVID-19 and the dire impact of COVID-19. And so we knew that more than a health crisis for us here in South Africa, just like many other African countries, COVID-19 had a very significant economic impact that essentially almost accelerated and exacerbated the vulnerability of those who have been excluded from the mainstream economy. So not only then do we have the baggage of having had to deal with what do we do to recover well from the COVID-19 impact, we are now having to also look at the devastating effect of the current events that are taking place in our country, particularly which have been so devastating for our economy, because they are again bringing to the fore that while many things may be challenges in our country, those challenges primarily affect those who are in the margins, those who are vulnerable, who unfortunately in our context are actually the majority of the unemployed, the majority of those who work in the informal sector, the majority of those who are in rural areas. So our conversation becomes even more important in many, many ways, because we are now at an even more critical point in our history. There's even a greater sense of urgency around how do we have an inclusive, transformative recovery. Our discussions set us on the right path, as we had been discussing at the symposium, around the key building blocks for a transformative recovery process. And I think some of the things that we were talking about at that time around these building blocks was basically how to begin to understand systemic vulnerabilities in this country and how to address them, not in cursory ways, not tinkering on the edges, but how to face the structural barriers that creates those vulnerabilities and then addressing them. So we began to say, for instance, gender was a major issue. We began to say the inability of young people to access the economy was a major issue. And all of those things were things that we were identifying. I suspect that in the current reality vulnerability, there may even be more of those vulnerabilities that we are needing to be looking at. But also we said that we wanted transformative solutions that are going to be results orientated. We said that we wanted holistic, systemic solutions and innovative solutions as well that would address all of these problems. So what we are going to do today is a two-way agenda as part of this launch of the Symposium report. The first portion, which is only going to be 30 minutes, is I'm going to invite key people who are part of our community, who have been working with us on these issues since the beginning, essentially. And we're going to have a very frank, quick discussion around their reflections on how do we achieve this transformation or this transformative environment in South Africa. I'm going to challenge them to help us to think through not just what we were talking about as of 2020, but also to bring in how do we address even the current situation that is going on, which is really pointing to one of the critical things we raised when we met at the symposium, which was the urgent need for a social compact or a social covenant in South Africa. The idea that we are all one people that are moving towards the same direction with one goal. So how do we ensure that across race lines, across the class lines, across sectors, whether you are civil society, government or business, that we are beginning to speak with one voice, but also we are beginning to work well together, to collaborate and to hold each other's hands as we are trying to solve the problems that we face. So I suspect that my first set of panelists have a really tough challenge in front of them, because we really do need to address these questions that might even help us to leave this meeting, which we might have come to now with heavy hearts, looking at what has been happening. But maybe this meeting might help us to zoom in on, are there any solutions that are immediate to address some of the stuff that we've been seeing? Are there some things that we can do as a collective as well to address some of those questions? So I'm going to ask my panelists and I'm going to ask everyone else to keep your audio muted unless I call your name. And of course, our audience, please go ahead and mute yourself as well, even if your video camera is on. We generally know the housekeeping rules for all of these virtual meetings that we have.